Acts 22. Acts 22. We are going to start at verse 22 and 23, even though that's not where it's our second point of a 6-point outline for this chapter. And we did last week, we kind of went over again Paul's, these are all D words, Paul's defense and then Paul's denouncers. And so he has these enemies, and then it ends up going south for him. He didn't fare well in his presentation, and it was in verse 21 where he doesn't fare well with his presentation. Is Paul's desire. This is where we ended last week. Paul's desires. When God's will becomes our will, when God's desires become our desires, that's when it makes things in life a lot easier. He said unto me, depart, for I will send thee far hence unto the Gentiles. And then when he hit that word, Gentiles, that just set him off. That was the magic word. I think it was 2 weeks ago I asked you for what are the set-off words that just set people off. And not that we have to say them again, but it's people get just turned off. We are so politically, when I say we, I don't mean we here. Politically correct, you got to watch everything you say. This pronoun, gender-neutral pronoun thing with city halls and management and government, it's spreading. It's like a bad rash, you know. And it's spreading where you have to say we and they. You can't say he and she. And it's probably going to get worse before it gets better. You wonder what will the end result of all this be?
We won't be able to speak at all.
Well, is this a mark of the last days? Is this, or will this end? This nonsense end?
Usually it takes a world war to clean it up.
I would have to say you're right. Usually it takes a world war to. You got to get rid of these people. Say that again?
It's going to get worse and worse.
It's going to get worse. It's going to get worse before it gets better.
Oh, isn't that a verse? It's going to wax worse and worse.
Well, no, it says that. Yeah, where does it say that? That is a verse. That's not quite how it goes. Evil men and seducers shall wax worse and worse. So that is true. Anybody want to venture a guess? Old Testament, New Testament? New Testament. Pardon? Timothy. So we're in 1st and 2nd Timothy. What chapter of 1st and 2nd Timothy? Chapter 3. You're right. Now, is it 1 Timothy or 2 Timothy? Let's find it. See how you narrowed it down. You know more than you think. I know, I brought this up when I was at Bible Believers. It's 2 Timothy. Because I know it's on the left column of a right page. I'm pretty sure.
13.
But evil men and seducers shall wax worse and worse, deceiving and being deceived. So it's nothing new. It's nothing new.
You don't tell you know, you just have to look at history. All you have to do is look at history. And our society has to, Joe's right, it might be way worse. And then we're just going to turn on each other. And then the Roman
So this is 2,000 years ago. It's been cleaned up since then, multiple times. There's a verse that we're going to use in Isaiah at the end of the sermon, near the end of the sermon, that just shows what this AOC is, just a blabbermouth, Debbie Blabbermouth Schultz, who knows nothing, and she shoots her mouth off. And there's a verse about that. When did they make that movie? Something about having 10 kids or 11 kids, 12 kids. Cheaper by the dozen.
The original, with Clifton Black?
Yeah, it's an early movie.
1950s.
Nin-
1950s.
Early 19, the original movies, but it depicts what era? Pardon?
World War I.
Yeah, that's what I wanted you to say. Before World War I, and then who were the two women that, I've never watched the whole movie. It doesn't interest me enough to watch it. But two women come to the house, and they're what is it the two women are? Oh, it's one woman?
One woman comes to the house, these people live.
And they're promoting something.
These people live like 20 miles from New York City, and this was a woman from Planned Parenthood, and she was shocked that there was a family of 12 kids within 20 miles of National Airport.
Okay. And then how does he give her the shock? I think what does he do?
Well,
He assembles them. How does he assemble them?
And then he whistles his special whistle.
He blows the whistle, right? There's very few things, the tonsils coming out. I could have seen the whole thing, I just don't remember. But all the kids assemble, she's shocked, and she storms out, right?
Oh yeah, and he even says things. I think these are all of them. We might have a few more here somewhere.
Yeah. But what I wanted you to say was when it depicts, now this is just a story, a Hollywood story, but this depicts an era before World War I. So then what cleaned it up?
Look underneath. I had this crossed out.
World War I. They just started annihilating people. Yeah. The World War II cleans it up. Now you got more wars going on than ever before. And we're not cleaning it up. I mean, it's not like we're on the front lines. Who died in World War II? Soldiers or civilians? Well, both, but basically, the major casualties? The civilians. The civilians did. In the Boxer Rebellion with the China, who was killed there. Civilians, man, they just go in there. If you have the wrong last name, man, you're toast. Okay, Paul's denouncer. So he sets them off by saying the wrong word. He says Gentiles. Now, what was his presentation like? I don't know. So my last time where now you may not like the sermon. I'm thinking, I'm going to preach a sermon once. You're going to say that was the worst sermon he ever preached. I thought about that. The worst sermon. And then one day it'll be the last sermon that I'll ever preach. And who knows how you're going to take today? How will you take it? So the last time I preached outside of the church was, anybody want to guess where it was? I had to preach my mother's funeral. Now it came up that I wasn't going to preach my mother's funeral. And something had been said that I wasn't going to preach my mother's funeral. And my mother came to church here. I am related to her, really kind of close.
You were her pastor.
And I was her pastor. And my mother always, no exceptions, always downplayed the church. I don't mean this church. Always downplayed the church. Always downplayed going to church, anything to do with church. When I got saved, man, that was the end of life as we know it, man. And then I wasn't ostracized, but it was like, what are you doing? And then, but then when we started the church, that all changed. My mother never said anything negative about the church. She was always positive about the church, always inviting people to the church. It was like a flip-flop. And then before that, I would say about 5 years or so before that, before we started the church, maybe 8 years before that, she had gotten saved. Off of my testimony, she had come and had gotten saved. And then there was this flip-flop. Not before we started the church, but when we started the church, man, it was... She came to the second service at the house, had a Charlie horse, and she came ever since. She came to the altar and knelt down, which was a bench. She had a Charlie horse, screamed, it was laying on the floor. That was a joke. We kind of laughed about that, but she never really missed. She would drive here. When she couldn't drive, I'd pick her up, and then she couldn't. It was kind of a waste for her to come after that. But it came up that, well, maybe I wasn't going to do the service. That, well, so-and-so, they do a real good job. And I thought, wow. I said, well, I anticipated doing this. I didn't know what I was going to preach. I didn't have it prepared. And I didn't know what I was going to preach, but I just assumed I was doing it. So, but in the end, I did it. And then my relative, I've got relative, when we say relatives, direct relatives, brothers and sisters, which one is, they're as Catholic as Catholic gets. And then I've got another one that will come here and is amazed, said, wow, really? And is amazed, is not antagonistic, but is not a believer. I don't know what they are. But they're not negative. They're not negative, but they're not positive either. But they've never been negative, but they're always upbeat. Wow, you built this? And like, I can't believe this. And it's always been positive. Then we have the others that are Baptist. And I think that there's a fear that I'm going to say the word Gentiles in the mixed crowd of Jewish people. That's the buzzword. Now I'm only using that as an example. Should Paul have said Gentiles?
He did not. The Lord said Gentiles.
Oh, hey, you know what? Yeah, I will send the, and he said unto me, exactly. But he could have cut that. He could have cut that out and not even said the verse.
You don't argue with the boss.
You don't argue with the boss. Should he had said that? And the answer is absolutely. So I know what I said when I first got up in front of the crowd at the funeral. I said, if I do not preach, I forget exactly how I put it. If I don't tell you the truth, then I'm not going to be true to my office. That's how I opened up the funeral. Listen, we've been to funerals. We've been to a funeral where the Baptist preacher says, no, I would never do this. You probably think we're a bunch of hillbillies. Been to a funeral like that. I've been to a funeral where they preached the baby wasn't even in heaven. We've been to a Baptist. We're not doing that. But I got up there and I thought to myself, well, we had one said one thing, another said another thing, and this is what's going on in my mind. Is I'm praying. I said, I hope they forget all of that. Everybody here, forget whatever was said. And I'm glad I'm talking last, because what I have to say, this is what I want them to remember. It's best to go last because that's what you want them to remember. And so I got up there and said, if I don't hold true to the Word of God, then I'm not going to be true to my office. All right? So Then we also had people there. They don't come to our church. They openly say, "Man, we just don't understand you," and they have their phone. And this is a joke. They have their phone. And this was said after. I think I said the word rotodome. My grandfather drove in the rotodome. Now, I don't know if that's the right term, but the one will whisper to the other and say, rotodome. They get on their clicker and they got to look that up because what is this guy talking about? What was the other word I said? I said wing walker. If you had a click onto your phone about a wing walker, I don't know. I think you're living in another time zone.
Well, they are, 25.
Yeah, well, I was certainly born after wing walkers, but I knew what a wing
Yeah,
walker
but
is.
you've seen films of it, like, you know.
Yeah, but I was born after the films were made, you know.
Yeah, but they were shown.
They may have, let's say they logged on to Wing Walker. They had a Wing Walker. But this is an ongoing joke. And so what was the other word? What was the other word I said? Biscuit tea. What other word did I say? Steeplejack. I said steeplejack. That was an emergency. Steeplejack. So what is this? The guy that gets up there and puts will repair a steeple, technically put the cross on the steeple. They put the cross up on the steeple.
Today you call him an iron worker because he's putting up.
An iron worker,
Skyscraper.
but he's a steeplejack. But that was an emergency call on the phone. Steeplejack. You had to do the steeplejack. Whatever it was, you had to get these things out of the way because well, I can't go over there and explain everything. I mean, this is a funeral. We have to get going here, Yeah.
I had a cousin, Ronnie, he was a steeplejack. He painted the flagpole on top of the terminal tower when he was a youngin'.
Say that again, brother?
I had a cousin who painted the terminal tower. He was a steeplejack.
Oh, and he went up there to do the flagpole or something?
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah, steeplejack.
That isn't for me.
A steeplejack would also change the light bulbs on transmitter towers and paint them.
Yeah, somebody's got to go up to the, out where you guys live, State and Pleasant Valley. Is it State and Pleasant Valley?
Yeah.
Those things are cabled up there. Somebody's got to go up there periodically.
Yeah.
I look at that and I'm thinking, well, that's not my job. But somebody does that. So anyway, our point here, Paul's denouncers, how this thing begins is Paul's selection of words. Now, folks, I had to think about this. How am I going to present this where it is the truth? That they will receive the truth without having things go south, where it's done, if you're, however you serve, you want it to be served correctly so that people receive it. Where they don't block you out. Pardon? Diplomatically. And I did think about that. I just didn't get up there and start shooting, blazing away and wherever it ends up. I mean, I thought about this. How can I present this so that it's personal yet palatable? So I decided to, since obviously I grew up with my mother, right? That I do all these personal stories of hers. And so I then took her personal stories and then got the gospel in there. What's the first thing a person needs to know in order to be saved? That they're a sinner. Okay? I used 2 points, 2 stories to show that they're sinners. But the first one probably was the worst one. And I thought to myself, well, let's just get this out of the way. I mean, we may as well get this out of the way. You're a dirty, rotten sinner. Now, we got people, does a Catholic know they're a sinner? I would say so. They just need to be reminded like we need to be reminded, time to time. So I painted this picture, And these were stories that my mother would tell on a regular basis of my grandfather. And the whole thing was a lie. And we were older when we were told that it was a lie, so that we were considered in her mind old enough to take it. What is the big taboo? What are married people not supposed to do 60 years ago, 80 years ago? They're not to get divorced. I mean, listen, they make whole novels about this. This is the big sin, or having a baby out of wedlock. Today, it's just, it's all accepted, you know, just one big happy family. Well, years ago, this is a big scandal. So you didn't tell anybody that. So we were told that my grandfather died in repairing a car, that it slipped off the jacks, it fell on him, and it crushed him, and he died. The truth was, he abandoned my mother's family, remarried, and he died years later of cancer. And now I included all that for the first point. But it was to show, and then I quoted verses to support that. So to get the shock over with, is basically I told everybody, you're of your father the devil. Since my grandfather was like the devil, my mother was of her father the devil. She was born of him. So assuming that to tell them all of us are born of our father the devil. We're not children of God, we're children of the devil. And we got to get from that family into God's family. So then I took the other stories and marched it to the end, you know, to get to these stories. Well, I was told after, I had a couple of kids, they said, oh, we were really... When I was telling the stories, I did that right from the get-go. They said, boy, we were really nervous. So my own children, they were nervous. A couple of mine had told me that. But you see, we've got to do it, as it says here, with Paul's denouncers, Paul's selection of words so as not to antagonize his audience of Jews. So these things are really important in how the presentation is made. If you don't know what to say, what is the best thing? What is the best thing to say? Say nothing. Is you weigh your words, think of the correct response, and then make the response. Sometimes the response needs to be blunt. But we're not God. God's always going to have the right response. But a couple of my kids had actually told me they were a little nervous before we had gotten started. But my one niece, I mean, they are as Catholic. I mean, she was bawling her eyes out. It really affected her. Now, will she get saved? I don't know. But the presentation is very, very important. In Paul's denouncers here, they're given a good presentation. Notice how he does this. Verse 1, it's in your notes, men, brethren, fathers. He's got to make connections. He makes these connections. He speaks to them in the Hebrew tongue. I mean, obviously, it would be bad if he spoke to them in some other language. Now listen, on Friday, I had asked Corey, baby had gotten sick. Is she still sick? Still kind of sick, worn out a wee bit. Once you throw up, when a baby throws up, after so many vomits, what's that called? When you're vomiting, that's the dry heaves, you know, wears them have to frazzle. But on Friday night, Corey was over and I asked her, I said, are you willing to be on TAM and put this in Spanish on the radio? She said she was. So she's going to do all the translating. I have one translated. We want to do the 60-second tracks. Listen, the 60-second tracks are not the end of the rainbow. That's what I developed. That's what the 60-second track is. It's not like we have arrived. It's just one other avenue. All right? So I'm not promoting it as the best of the best. I'm not promoting that. I want to write 5 more. And so I'm getting topics. I'm over there. When I'm doing certain jobs, I get thinking. One's going to be on forgiveness as a topic. Another on the wall, which would line up with the door one. It's going to be a kind of a remake of that. The wall, because that is popular. There's another one. Creation. The great creator is Jesus Christ, and have a track on that. And then Corey's going to get in there, and with this session, I'll go up in there and do the recordings, and then put it on the radio. And say, well, why would you do it with English speaking? This is an English speaking thing. There's going to be a lot of people that will listen. I still want to do the shorthand one and put that up on the billboard. Listen, that flash is only for 1 week. Goes to the next one. Do one on shorthand. No one does shorthand anymore. Well, no one did steeplejack. I mean, that word anymore, but man, they were logging, their thumbs were moving like mad. All right, and then we'll get it on a Spanish speaking and see what the rate is like. But we want to make connections and also getting people involved. Listen, I asked TAM. I wanted you on there. Myself either playing the guitar for a track, or you with the violin. Why would they not do that?
They're a new stock station for one thing. The other thing is...
No, this is an ad. This is a 60-second ad. There's a legal reason.
Yeah, the clearance on the music.
Yeah, the copyright on that. It's something to do with, well, no, we don't do that because of...
Unless you do a tune that's in the public domain.
Yeah, it was, but that biplane went down as fast as I tried to launch it, man. It didn't even make it off the ground. Now, can I do a little more research on it and be able to do that? I don't know, but I might. He goes, men, brethren, fathers. He's making these connections. The Hebrew tongue. I am a Jew. I mean, it is the connection being made. He is trained by the best Jewish teacher out there, Gamaliel. Perfect manner of the law, verse 3. He is zealous. He was half cuckoo like the rest of them, trying to kill, being a Jew, doing all the performance of the Jew. He went to go kill these people who were not of, as he says, this way. This way. And so he doesn't use the word Christian this way, meaning I am the way, the truth, and the light. That's what it was called. Jesus of Nazareth, not Jesus Christ. See, he makes these connections with the city. See, so he might say, well, he downplays the name of Christ. I mean, this is Paul's testimony. I don't think anything here is watered down. I think everything's done in wisdom. Jesus of Nazareth, the description of Ananias. Ananias was a Jew, and his description of how Ananias was spoken by the Lord had a vision, right? Aren't these Jews into visions? And so he's still making these connections. He still doesn't say the name Jesus Christ. He calls him the Just One. And he was in the temple, and he brings the temple. I mean, these are big things of making the connection with those that are going to denounce him. It's kind of like outlining. When we do outline, we're going to have an outline this morning. When I did the sermon, I had no intention of doing an outline. I turned up having an outline. And we're going to go to 2 separate places again, like we did last week. 2 different verses in 2 separate places. And when you get these outlines, man, there is nothing wrong with using that outside the church. Beg, borrow, and steal, man. There's nothing new out there. And then we get to the offensive word, the Gentiles. He saved that for the last, man. And he didn't intend to end there. The denouncers, they intervened. Let's see, that was page 5 in my count. Now we're on page 6. Racial groups won't eat together. Genesis 43, verse 32. What is that? What are the two racial groups? They will not eat together. The Egyptians and the Hebrews. Who was offended? The Hebrews or the Egyptians? The Egyptians were offended. What is the profession that is in offense to the Egyptian? A shepherd, which is, then technically we would say the pastor is the shepherd, and he is the big offense. The big offense. Racial groups won't live together. Where did the Jews live? The land of Goshen. Folks, we have our little paradise here. You could call it a type of heaven coming up. We don't live together in the future. But the same is true down here, is that we are to be separated. Separated. So racial groups won't live together. Christians do the same, though. Now this is in an evil way. What takes place in Galatians 2? They won't eat together. Who is not eating together? And who is promoting this?
Peter.
Peter is. And who won't eat together? Who was Peter eating with?
Gentiles.
He was eating with Gentiles. When the Cadillacs and the Lincoln Continental showed up, he hightailed it out the back door because the Jews showed up. And he was caught in the act of doing this, and that's when Paul corrects that. Christians are not to do that. Christians are the same as far as we don't separate one another. I'd like to think we never have tried to restrict anybody. I can't think of any church that does restrict people. Can you think of anybody that restricts people? I mean, I could see where you'd have a restraining order if you had violence going on. But other than that, people are invited to church. Right? But they won't eat together, they won't live together, and Christians can do the same. Now this was with the world here and these other two before that. Things worthy of death in our culture. They wanted to kill him. Now, death to Moby Dick. They wanted to kill Paul. They wanted to kill him. Things worthy of death in our culture. Interfering with this, one's income. Oh, like a strike breaker. I mean, where we can actually get Pinkerton. Pinkerton would be doing that. They would actually be murdering people, shooting them. Their reputation, people will kill over that. Their social status, they'll kill. You interfere with that. The assault of words. Folks, we're getting down to the assault of words in this country. Words. The assault of words. I heard a term, I've never heard the term before, and if I have in the past, I don't remember it, but it was on the Bob France. Is Bob France?
Yeah.
Is he on in the morning?
Yeah, 9 o'clock.
Okay.
Well, it was this AOC was speaking in, they're all jumping on board. He says it's a stampede of stupidity.
Yeah.
Have you, anybody, I've never heard the term before. Has anybody ever heard that term before?
No.
It sure fits. It's like they can't get there fast enough. They're just dying to get there. Stampede of stupidity. In this, the assault of words, the word Gentile, this word, it's enough to drive them to kill. To kill. All right, now getting back to and then we're going to move on to number 3 here. And that is Paul's detention. Now I did think about this at the beginning of the sermon. we don't want to turn everybody off. But if I lump everybody together, that we're all sinners, we've got to realize where we are. Ye are of your father, the devil. All right? They want to gnash your... I figured, let's just get this out of the way now. But those that... now, what I personally am trying to reach and what God wants me to reach could be two different... He wants me to reach everybody. But what personally I'm trying to reach, man, they were no more offended than the man moon. I think Baptists were more offended than the Catholics. You know, they knew, right? It's like you don't have to go into a bar and tell them they're sinners. They know. Or into a jail. You don't preach on sin when you're in a jail. We weren't in a jail because they all know why they're there. Why they're there. So, but it's enough to drive them to kill him when he said that. But nobody wanted, at least right after service, I didn't know of anybody who wanted to kill me for calling him the father of the devil. But I figured, let's just get this out of the way right now. And it's the way, and also the way that it is presented is really, really important. I don't know, I went out in the audience to see myself. Is once in a while, if I'm in a situation, I might ask somebody, well, tell me how it sounded, or tell me what you thought. I might ask somebody, so that I can correct problems that I may have. One way they would say to do it in the Institute, if you're going to correct yourself or critique yourself, how would you do that? No one else is involved. Tape record it. If you don't like what you're hearing, man, well, they don't either. Tape record it. Where would you practice? They would say, go out in the woods and practice. Right? Preach to the trees. Practice. Find a place to practice, and so on. All right, so presentation is very, very important. He gets to the bad word, and then the denouncers. They denounce him in verse 22 and 23, and man, he's not fit to live. They're willing to kill over this. Now Paul's detention, verse 24. The chief captain commanded him to be brought into the castle and bade that he should be examined by scourging, that he might know wherefore they cried so against him. Well, folks, this isn't the county doing psychoceramics on him. I mean, they're just going to beat him. We're going to get he wants to know what happened. They're just going to get to the crux of this and start beating him. His detention. Castle was the castle of Antonia, which is the barracks of the Roman soldiers of Lysia's command. All right? Examined by scourging because Paul preached in Hebrew, because it still left the commander in the dark. He can't speak that. I mean, when I hear somebody speaking a foreign language that knows it, when you hear Corey speak it, does it sound like when they're speaking Spanish, are they really flying? It's not por favor, right? They don't say por favor. I mean, I don't know how they do it. Oh, the other day, to say kiss is to say peso, like a peso, money, peso. Is that right? Peso, peso, huh?
Peso.
Oh, with a B, peso.
Peso.
Well, that sounds the same thing. Peso. Well, Corey came over. It was really funny. Esther can do a peso, and she could do it. We're both like she could do a peso. I'm thinking she could do a kiss. And it was what was it that Esther could do? She can do a peso. It was a puzzle. We couldn't figure it out. But when it just amazes me when they can speak so fast and so well, and it was just funny that they couldn't understand. I couldn't understand what she was trying to say in English word, And it's a puzzle. And she was practicing that half the night. How do you say that again? Puzzle. We had to practice it. All right, so he doesn't understand what's being said, and so he's going to beat him. Paul's deduction. So he's I always say this: I'm not fast on my feet. But I have known people that are fast on their feet and they have the right answer right now. I generally have to drive to the post office, take a moment, and let me think this out. Or I have to make a delivery, or I have to sleep on this. I have to sleep on this. Because most people, I would say most people, don't make the right decisions. Snap decisions are usually not right decisions. You got to sleep on it. Once you sleep on it, you find out that you were going to make the exact wrong move. But I do know guys that make the right move now. Now, if you're going to get beat, you're going to try to make the right move right now, right? Paul wants to make the right move. All right. Paul's deduction is in verse 25. So they bound him with thongs. Paul said unto the centurion that stood by, "Is it lawful for you to scourge a man as a Roman and uncondemned?" All right, so there are people who can think really fast and come up with the right answer right now. So the Romans had one law for themselves and another law for everyone else. And since Paul is a Roman citizen, right, Paul appeals to Roman law. So he saves himself. I mean, I don't think Paul purposely went to go get beatings. If he received it, well, he had gotten it, but he saved himself from that. He makes this attempt, Paul's deduction. And there's these two tiers. There's these two tiers there. One law for the Romans and one law for everybody else. Everybody else is less than. And we're going to beat them. Paul's deliverance. So we're already 10 minutes through. Now, it's important, I guess, this morning, and we've been over this many times, is if you're going to give a speech, it is your turn to talk. Weigh your words. Don't you think that's important? Weigh your words. There's this ad, there's Star, that was there is an ad out there. It's a joke, it's a parody they do on, what was the name of the prosecutor? What's his first name? Starr, who prosecuted the Clinton.
Oh, Ken Starr.
Ken Starr, and then who's the Democratic pundit? I can't think of his name. No, not Lanny Davis. The one that he talked like that.
Oh, yeah, I know. Oh, yeah. Kind of bigger guy.
Well, there's
James
this
Carville,
Carville,
the snake.
the snake. So the way the parody works is they ask Ken Starr, "Well, Ken, what do you think of it?" "Well, and so he gets and then Carville goes, blah, 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 and he butts in, just continually butting in. And then, "Well, Ken, what do you think of?" "Well, and then Carville, it's a funny ad, it's a funny parody, whatever they do, is you may feel that way at times, is you've weighed your words, and now I want to say something, and man, everybody is smarter than you. And they are just going to, and they cannot let you get in a word edgewise. Right? You may have that within your family, where people won't let a word in edgewise. Is to hear everybody out, to make wise choices, and so on. These things are so important to be able to do that. Is just slow down. Slow down. Now, I'm able to do this here because it's my turn to talk. Shake hands before preaching.